Captain Jake Morrison stared at the navigation display with growing concern. The numbers made no sense. According to every instrument on the bridge, the horizon's edge had just traveled farther in 3 seconds than humanity had ever gone before. "Amy, tell me we didn't just break physics," Jake called to his chief engineer. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her console, her dark hair falling across her worried face. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures all around us. This isn't Proxima Centauri." The experimental faster-than-light drive had been humanity's greatest achievement. After decades of theoretical work, they had finally built a ship capable of reaching the nearest star. The plan was simple: jump to Proxima Centauri, take some readings, and return home as heroes. Instead, a solar flare had interfered with their navigation computer at the worst possible moment. "Chris, what are you seeing out there?" Jake asked his xenobiologist. Chris Palmer pressed his face against the observation window, his eyes wide with amazement. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake moved to the window and felt his breath catch. Outside, a massive structure stretched in all directions. It was clearly artificial, with gleaming metal surfaces and geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Lights moved along its surface in patterns that suggested heavy traffic. Most shocking of all, ships of dozens of different designs moved around it like insects around a hive. "Those aren't human ships," Amy whispered. Before Jake could respond, their communication system crackled to life. A series of strange sounds filled the bridge, followed by what sounded like multiple different languages. Then, impossibly, English came through the speakers. "Unknown vessel. You have entered Zelani Trade Station Alpha without proper clearance. State your origin and purpose." The 3 humans looked at each other. This was it. First contact with alien life. Jake knew that whatever he said next would determine humanity's future among the stars. Most captains might have explained the situation. Honestly, they might have apologized for the intrusion and asked for help getting home. Jake Morrison was not most captains. "This is Captain Morrison of the Human Federation vessel Horizon's Edge," he said with perfect confidence. "We're here to establish trade relations with the Zelani Collective." Amy and Chris stared at him. There was no Human Federation. They were 3 people in an experimental ship that had gotten lost. But Jake continued as if he commanded a fleet. "We've traveled a great distance to meet with your people. Our government is very interested in opening discussions about mutual trade agreements." A long pause followed. Then the alien voice returned, sounding puzzled. "Human Federation. Checking records. No entry found. Please proceed to docking. Bay 7 for processing." A small ship appeared outside their window, clearly meant to guide them. Jake nodded to Amy, who began following the escort. As they moved closer to the station, the true scale became apparent. The structure was easily 100 times larger than anything humans had ever built. Thousands of ships moved around it, representing dozens of different alien designs. "Captain," Chris whispered, "what are we doing?" "We're making history," Jake replied. "Look around us. This is clearly a major trading hub. These aliens have faster-than-light travel, massive space, stations, and a functioning galactic economy. If we show up looking lost and helpless, we'll be treated like primitives. But if we act like we belong here," Amy understood immediately, "we become equals instead of curiosities." The docking process was surprisingly familiar. Universal physical laws meant that some engineering solutions worked the same way everywhere. Their ship settled into a berth designed for vessels much larger than theirs, but the basic concept was identical to Earth space stations. A delegation of aliens waited for them in the docking bay. Jake had expected something from a science fiction movie, but the reality was both stranger and more ordinary. The beings looked like a cross between humans and birds, with feathered crests and large eyes. They wore clothing that suggested official status. "I am Administrator Kellen," the lead alien said through a translation device. "Welcome to Zelani Station Alpha. I must admit, our records show no previous contact with your species." Jake smiled warmly. "That's not surprising. The Human Federation has been focused on our local sector until recently. We're just beginning to expand our trading relationships to distant regions." It was a complete lie, but Jake delivered it with the confidence of absolute truth. Behind him, Amy and Chris tried to look like experienced space travelers instead of three humans who had never seen an alien before. I see, Kellen said, though he still looked confused. And what does your Federation offer for trade? Jake's mind raced. What could humanity possibly offer to a civilization that could build structures like this? Then he remembered Amy's reports about their ship's performance. Our primary exports are advanced computing systems and engineering solutions, he said. Human technology excels at adaptive problem-solving and creative engineering approaches. Kellen's feathered crest rose with interest. Indeed, we have been experiencing some technical difficulties with our older systems. Perhaps we could arrange a demonstration? Jake glanced at Amy, who gave him a slight nod. Their ship's computers were primitive by the standards around them, but they used completely different design principles. Sometimes a fresh approach was more valuable than advanced technology. Of course, Jake said. My chief engineer, Amy Rodriguez, would be happy to take a look at any problems you're having. As they followed Kellen deeper into the station, Jake realized they had crossed a line they could never uncross. They were no longer just lost humans hoping to get home. They were official representatives of a fictional human federation, committed to maintaining a lie that was growing bigger with every passing moment. The corridor around them bustled with activity. Dozens of different alien species moved about. Their business? Some recognizably humanoid, others completely alien. The variety was staggering, suggesting this empire included hundreds of different worlds and cultures. Tell me, Jake said casually as they walked, how long has the Zilani Collective been operating stations like this? Several thousand years, Kellen replied, though we have expanded significantly in recent centuries. The empire now includes over 800 member species across 12 galactic sectors. 800 species, 12 sectors. Jake kept his expression neutral, but inside he was reeling. They hadn't just stumbled into first contact. They had accidentally entered a galactic empire that made humanity look like cave dwellers. And somehow he had to convince everyone they met that humans belonged here. Amy Rodriguez had never felt so far out of her depth. The technical problem that Administrator Kellen showed them would have been challenging on Earth. Here, surrounded by alien technology she barely understood, it seemed impossible. The main computer core of Zilani Station Alpha was failing. The system controlled everything from life support to traffic management for the massive trading hub. Thousands of alien lives depended on it working properly. Our best technicians have been unable to solve the problem, Kellen explained as they stood before a wall of crystalline computing devices. The system has become increasingly unstable over the past several cycles. Amy studied the display screens showing system diagnostics. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed, but the problem was oddly familiar. The symptoms looked exactly like what happened to Earth computers when they became overloaded with conflicting processes. Chris, she whispered to the xenobiologist, remember the university's main computer last year, when it kept crashing because too many departments were running incompatible programs? Chris nodded. You think it's the same issue? Maybe. Amy turned to Kellen. Can you show me how different systems access this computer core? For the next hour, Amy asked questions that seemed simple, but revealed a complex truth. The Zilani had built their technology to be extremely powerful and reliable, but they had never considered efficiency or flexibility. Every system ran independently, fighting for resources without any coordination. Your computer is trying to do everything at once, Amy explained. On Earth, we learned to manage resources dynamically, sharing processing power based on current needs. Kellen's feathered crest twitched with confusion. But our systems have operated this way for centuries. Change would require rebuilding everything. Amy smiled. This was exactly the kind of problem humans excelled at solving. Not rebuilding, just reorganizing. Let me show you something. She connected her personal tablet to the alien system through a series of adapters. The Zilani engineers watched nervously as she began typing commands. To them, her approach seemed reckless and unpredictable. To Amy, it was just basic troubleshooting. Within minutes, she had identified the core conflicts and began implementing what humans called load balancing. Instead of letting systems fight for resources, she created a simple management protocol that allocated computing power based on priority and demand. The effect was immediate. Warning indicators began turning from red to green. System response times improved dramatically. Several engineers made excited sounds in their native languages. "Remarkable," Kellen said. "In 1 hour, you have improved efficiency by 30%. How is this possible?" Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward with the confident smile that was becoming his trademark. "Human engineering philosophy focuses on adaptive solutions rather than rigid designs. We found that flexibility often matters more than raw power." It was true, though not by choice. Humans had developed creative engineering because they couldn't afford to build everything from scratch every time. Limited resources had forced them to find clever solutions instead of brute force approaches. While Amy worked on the technical problem, Chris Palmer was making discoveries of his own. The station's crew included dozens of different alien species, each with specialized roles. The Zilani handled administration, the Korthan managed security, the Vex controlled logistics. Each group had evolved for specific tasks and rarely worked outside their expertise. "It's like they're all specialists," Chris explained to Jake during a brief break. "Each species is incredibly good at one thing, but they don't seem to adapt or learn new skills. And humans? We're generalists. We're not the best at anything, but we can do everything reasonably well. More importantly, we can learn and adapt quickly." Jake filed this information away. Understanding how this galactic civilization worked would be crucial to maintaining their deception. So far, the aliens seemed impressed by human adaptability, treating it as an exotic trait rather than a sign of primitive development. The real test came when a crisis struck the station. A massive cargo ship had suffered engine failure and was drifting toward one of the main docking bays. Standard protocol required evacuation of the entire section and a lengthy repair process that would shut down trade for several days. "There must be another solution," Jake said when Kellen explained the situation. "I'm afraid not. Safety protocols are very specific about such matters." Jake looked at his crew. Amy was still working on the computer systems. Chris was studying alien biology data. Neither of them had any experience with space traffic control or emergency procedures, but they were human, which meant they would figure something out. "What if we don't evacuate?" Jake asked. "What if we solve the problem instead?" Kellen's translator struggled with the concept. "Solve the problem? But the protocols clearly state." "Protocols are guidelines," Jake interrupted. "Sometimes situations require creative solutions." It took an hour of discussion, but Jake eventually convinced the station administrators to let his team try. Amy quickly analyzed the drifting ship's trajectory and engine systems. Chris studied the biological requirements of the ship's crew to understand their time constraints. Jake coordinated between different alien departments who had never worked together before. The solution they developed was typically human, complex, improvised, and slightly crazy. Instead of stopping the ship's drift, they would redirect it using the station's own positioning thrusters. Amy calculated the exact timing needed. Chris ensured the maneuver wouldn't harm the ship's crew. Jake convinced a dozen different alien departments to coordinate their efforts. It worked perfectly. The drifting cargo ship was guided safely into an empty docking bay with minutes to spare. Trade continued without interruption. Most importantly, word spread throughout the station about the humans who had solved an impossible problem by ignoring the rules. "Your species has a very different approach to challenges," Administrator Kellen observed as they watched the rescued ship being repaired. "Humans believe that most problems have solutions if you're willing to think creatively," Jake replied. "We've learned that sometimes the best approach is the one nobody has tried before." Over the following days, more aliens began seeking human advice on various problems. Amy found herself consulting on engineering issues throughout the station. Chris was asked to mediate disputes between species who had different biological needs. Jake was invited to participate in trade negotiations as a neutral party. Each success built on the previous one. The humans' reputation grew from curious newcomers to valuable problem solvers. More importantly, Jake's confident assertions about the Human Federation began to seem believable. Surely only an advanced civilization could produce such capable representatives. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. They were succeeding not because they were advanced, but because they were primitive. Their lack of experience with galactic protocols allowed them to find solutions that more sophisticated species had overlooked. "We're like children in a room full of adults," Amy observed one evening as they reviewed their progress. "We don't know enough to understand why something can't be done." "Which means we just do it anyway," Chris added. Jake nodded. "And as long as we keep succeeding, nobody will question our credentials." The masquerade was working, but Jake knew it was also growing more dangerous. Each day brought new responsibilities and higher stakes. Eventually, someone would ask questions they couldn't answer or make requests they couldn't fulfill. But for now, they were riding the wave of their own audacity, solving problems and making friends across a galactic empire that still had no idea humanity had never left its home solar system before today. Word traveled fast in a galactic empire. Within a week of their arrival at Zalani Station Alpha, reports about the mysterious humans had reached trading posts across 3 different sectors. The stories grew with each telling, as stories often. Captain Jake Morrison sat in what the station called a diplomatic suite, though it looked more like a luxury hotel room designed by aliens who had never seen a hotel. He was reading message after message requesting human intervention in various disputes and problems across the empire. "Lisa, we have a situation," he called to his crew's diplomat. Lisa Chen had been a junior trade negotiator back on Earth, handling disputes between mining companies and environmental groups. Now she found herself being asked to mediate conflicts between entire alien civilizations. "How big a situation?" Lisa asked, looking up from her own stack of requests. "The Borvek Confederation and the Thrain Republic have been in a border dispute for 300 years. Both sides want us to help resolve it." Lisa raised an eyebrow. 300 years? What makes them think we can solve something their diplomats couldn't handle in 3 centuries? "Because we solved the cargo ship crisis in an hour," Chris Palmer said from across the room. "And because we fixed their computer system in a day. To them, humans are miracle workers who can solve any problem." The reputation was both a blessing and a curse. Every success raised expectations higher. Every request was more complex than the last. Soon they would be dealing with problems that required knowledge and resources they simply didn't have. But Jake had noticed something important about galactic politics. Most conflicts weren't really about resources or territory. They were about pride, tradition, and the inability to compromise without losing face. These were problems humans understood very well. "Lisa, I want you to take the Borvek-Thrain dispute," Jake decided. "But before you start negotiating, remember something important. These aliens think in terms of rigid hierarchies and ancient traditions. They probably can't imagine solutions that don't involve one side winning and the other side losing." Lisa nodded. Earth's history was full of similar conflicts. Win-win solutions. Exactly. Show them that compromise doesn't mean defeat. While Lisa prepared for her first interstellar diplomatic mission, Amy Rodriguez found herself dealing with an even bigger challenge. Engineers from across the empire were requesting human consultation on technical problems. The requests ranged from simple efficiency improvements to complete system overhauls. The problem was that Amy was just one person, and she was expected to revolutionize technology for an empire of 800 species. Fortunately, she was beginning to understand that most alien engineering problems had the same root cause as the station's computer issues. "They build everything to last forever," she explained to Jake. "Every system is designed to be perfect, from day one and never change. But nothing stays perfect forever. Eventually, you need to adapt." Amy's solution was typically human. Instead of trying to fix every system personally, she would teach the aliens how to fix systems themselves. She began conducting seminars on adaptive engineering principles, showing alien technicians how to make their systems more flexible and responsive. The response was enthusiastic but also troubling. The aliens treated Amy's basic engineering concepts like revolutionary insights. They took notes on ideas that any human engineering student would consider elementary. Either we're geniuses, Amy told Chris, or this galactic empire has some serious problems. Chris had been thinking the same thing. His studies of the various alien species had revealed a disturbing pattern. Each species was incredibly specialized, adapted for specific roles in the galactic economy. But specialization came with a cost. None of them were particularly good at learning new things or adapting to change. They're all stuck, Chris explained. The Zalani are administrators who can't do physical work. The Korthan are security specialists who can't handle complex logistics. The Vex are traders who can't perform technical repairs. Everyone depends on everyone else, but nobody can step outside their predetermined role. And humans? We're the opposite. We're not the best at anything, but we can learn to do everything. More importantly, we assume we can learn new things. Most of these aliens seem to think their abilities are fixed from birth. This insight gave Jake the key to understanding their success. Humans weren't succeeding because they were advanced. They were succeeding because they were flexible. In an empire built on rigid specialization, adaptability was the rarest and most valuable trait. The first real test of this theory came when Lisa returned from her diplomatic mission with shocking news. "I solved the Borvek-Thrain dispute," she announced, but she didn't look happy about it. "That's wonderful," Jake said. "What's the problem?" "It was too easy. 300 years of conflict. And I solved it in 2 days using basic mediation techniques we learned in college. The solution was so obvious that I kept waiting for someone to point out the catch." Lisa explained that the dispute had started over mining rights to a small asteroid field. Over the centuries, it had grown into a matter of national pride for both sides. Neither could back down without appearing weak. "So I suggested they mine it together," Lisa said. "Joint operation, shared profits, shared responsibility." They looked at me like I had suggested breathing underwater. Apparently, the concept of cooperation between equals was completely foreign to them. But it had worked. Both sides could claim victory by saying they had gained access to the disputed resources. Neither had to admit defeat because neither was giving up anything. The solution was so simple that it highlighted the rigid thinking that had kept the conflict alive for 3 centuries. "The scary part," Lisa continued, "is that they're calling it the Morrison Doctrine." Jake blinked. "The what?" "Your approach to problem solving. They think you've invented some revolutionary new form of diplomacy based on creative compromise and mutual benefit. They want to apply it to conflicts across the empire." Requests began pouring in from across the galactic community. The Dominion, Syndicate, the Empire's ruling council, sent formal invitations for human representatives to participate in major political negotiations. Trade guilds wanted human advisors to help resolve economic disputes. Even military commanders were asking for human strategic consultants. Jake realized they had reached a turning point. They could no longer pretend to be simple traders from the Human Federation. Their actions had positioned humanity as a major player in galactic politics. The lie was becoming bigger than they could control, but it was also becoming true. Every problem they solved, every conflict they mediated, every innovation they introduced was reshaping how the galactic empire functioned. Species that had been enemies for generations were finding common ground through human intervention. The empire was experiencing unprecedented growth and innovation. "We're not just pretending to be important anymore," Jake told his crew. "We actually are important. The question is, what do we do with that?" Amy looked up from yet another stack of technical consultation requests. "We could stop, admit the truth, and go home." "Could we?" Chris asked. "Look around. Half the empire is waiting for our next breakthrough. If we disappear now, some of these conflicts might restart. Projects might fail. People might die." Lisa nodded slowly. "We're not just representing humanity anymore. We're responsible for the changes we've started." Jake stared out the window at the vast space station bustling with activity from hundreds of alien species. Ships arrived and departed constantly, carrying goods and people across distances that humans could barely imagine. All of it was part of an empire that had existed for millennia, but was now changing because of 3 humans who had gotten lost on their way to the nearest star. Then we keep going, he decided. We're not ready for this responsibility, but nobody else can handle it either. We'll figure it out as we go along. And if we fail? Jake smiled with the confidence that had gotten them this far. Then we'll fail forward and learn something new in the process. That's what humans do. Outside the window, another ship arrived, carrying representatives from a distant world seeking human mediation in their latest crisis. The ripple effect was spreading, and there was no way to stop it now. The message from the Dominion Syndicate arrived on a ship that looked like it could destroy a small moon. Captain Jake Morrison read the formal request 3 times before the full implications sank in. The Krell hegemony and the Saran Commonwealth had declared war over control of the Nexus Gate, a massive space structure that controlled faster-than-light travel between 2 major galactic sectors. Both sides had requested human mediation before beginning what could become the largest conflict in centuries. They want us to prevent a galactic war, Jake announced to his crew. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her latest engineering consultation. Us? 3 people who got lost 2 weeks ago? According to the Syndicate, humans have become the Empire's most trusted mediators, Lisa Chen said, reading over Jake's shoulder. They're calling us the architects of practical peace. Chris Palmer shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago I was studying pond bacteria. Now I'm supposed to help prevent interstellar warfare. The situation was more complex than their previous challenges. The Nexus Gate was crucial infrastructure that both civilizations needed for trade and communication. Neither side could afford to lose access, but neither could accept sharing control with their historical enemies. Worse, the conflict was personal. The Krell hegemony believed in military strength and direct action. The Saran Commonwealth valued diplomatic finesse and careful planning. Their fundamental approaches to problem-solving were completely incompatible. We'll have to split up, Jake decided. This is too big for one team to handle. For the first time since arriving in the Galactic Empire, the human crew would be working separately. Each would face challenges that tested not just their problem-solving abilities, but their capacity to maintain the fiction of the Human Federation while operating alone. Lisa took the lead diplomatic mission to the Krell hegemony, homeworld. The Krell were imposing beings who resembled armored bears and valued straightforward communication above all else. Their society was built on concepts of honor, strength, and decisive action. Your species has an interesting reputation, General, Thrak announced when Lisa arrived at their military headquarters. The Krell respect beings who solve problems through action rather than endless discussion. Lisa had prepared for this by studying every human military strategist she could remember. The Krell expected her to think like a general, so she would give them what they wanted. The Nexus Gate situation requires a solution that demonstrates strength while achieving practical objectives, she said, using language the Krell would appreciate. Both sides need access, but neither can appear weak. Over several days of negotiations, Lisa proposed what she called a competitive cooperation model. Instead of fighting over the gate, both civilizations would compete to provide the best security and maintenance services. Success would be measured by efficiency and user satisfaction rather than military dominance. The Krell were intrigued by the idea of competition as a substitute for warfare. It appealed to their combative nature while achieving practical goals. General Thrak agreed to present the proposal to their war council. Meanwhile, Amy was dealing with a different crisis entirely. The mining operation in the disputed Zerian system had uncovered something unexpected, an ancient alien artifact that was interfering with all technology within 100 light-years. The artifact appears to be some kind of regulatory system, Amy explained to a gathering of confused alien engineers. It's trying to impose standardized operating parameters on all technology it encounters. The problem was that standardized parameters from a million-year-old civilization were completely incompatible with modern technology. Ships were losing power, communication systems were failing, and space stations were shutting down non-essential systems. Sam Williams, a junior engineer who had joined their growing team, worked alongside Amy to understand the artifact's programming. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. It's a teaching system, Sam explained, designed to help primitive civilizations develop technology according to specific guidelines. But it thinks everything in this sector is primitive and needs to be corrected. Amy realized this was exactly the kind of problem that required human-style, creative thinking. The aliens were trying to fight the artifact's influence or shut it down completely. Neither approach was working because they were treating it as a malfunction rather than a misunderstanding. What if we don't fight it? Amy suggested. What if we teach it instead? Working with alien technicians who still didn't fully understand her methods, Amy began communicating with the artifact through carefully designed technological demonstrations. She showed it examples of modern engineering that met its ancient standards while maintaining contemporary functionality. The process was slow and required exactly the kind of adaptive problem-solving that humans excelled at. Amy had to learn alien programming languages, understand million-year-old design principles, and find ways to bridge the gap between ancient and modern technology. Back on Zelani Station Alpha, Chris Palmer faced his own challenge. A plague had broken out on 3 different worlds, affecting multiple alien species in ways that made no biological sense. The disease seemed to target social behavior rather than physical health, causing normally cooperative species to become aggressively territorial. It's not really a disease, Chris explained to the medical team assembled from across the Empire. It's a psychological condition triggered by environmental stress. These species are reacting to changes in their social structure. The breakthrough came when Chris realized that all 3 affected worlds had recently implemented new trade agreements based on human mediation techniques. The changes were beneficial economically, but they disrupted social patterns that had existed for centuries. They're experiencing cultural shock, Chris diagnosed. Their societies are changing faster than their psychology can adapt to. The solution required combining human understanding of social dynamics with alien medical technology. Chris worked with xenopsychologists from a dozen different species to develop treatment protocols that helped the affected populations adapt gradually to their changing circumstances. Nicole Harper, another team member who had proven particularly skilled at systems analysis, was simultaneously working on reorganizing trade routes across an entire galactic sector. Her approach treated interstellar commerce like a massive logistics puzzle, using human concepts of efficiency and optimization to reduce travel times and increase profit margins. The aliens build their trade routes like subway maps, Nicole explained to Jake during one of their regular check-ins. Every destination connects to every other destination through a central hub, but that's incredibly inefficient for most cargo. Her solution involved creating express routes for high-priority shipments while maintaining local connections for routine trade. The concept was simple, but implementing it required convincing hundreds of different species to change shipping practices they had used for millennia. As reports came in from all the different missions, Jake realized they had crossed another threshold. They were no longer just solving individual problems or mediating specific conflicts. They were systematically reshaping how galactic civilization functioned. The Krell-Saren conflict was moving toward resolution through competitive cooperation. The Xerion artifact was being transformed from a technological threat into a teaching tool that could help integrate ancient knowledge with modern innovation. The plague worlds were recovering as their populations learned to adapt to beneficial changes. Trade efficiency was improving across entire sectors. But perhaps most importantly, other species were beginning to adopt human approaches to problem-solving. Alien engineers were experimenting with adaptive design principles. Diplomats were exploring win-win negotiation strategies. Scientists were questioning assumptions they had held for centuries. We're not just representing humanity anymore, Jake told his scattered team during a video conference. We're teaching the galaxy how to be more human. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. They had accidentally become teachers for a civilization far more advanced than their own. But the lessons they were sharing weren't about technology or science. They were about curiosity, adaptability, and the willingness to try new approaches when old ones stopped working. The question is, Amy said from her position near the ancient artifact, What happens when they don't need teachers anymore? When they've learned everything we can show them? Jake looked out at the stars surrounding Zelani Station Alpha, knowing that somewhere among them was a small blue planet where humanity was still learning to take its first steps into space. Then we go home and prepare for the galaxy to meet the rest of humanity, he said. Because this is just the beginning. 3 months after accidentally entering galactic civilization, Captain Jake Morrison stood before the Dominion Syndicate's full assembly. Representatives from 800 species filled the massive chamber, their attention focused on the human, who had somehow become the most influential figure in galactic politics. The Human Federation wishes to announce our expansion plans, Jake said with the same confidence that had carried them this far. He gestured to a holographic display showing star charts that stretched across multiple galactic sectors. To the assembled aliens, it looked like the map of a civilization preparing for massive territorial expansion. In reality, it was a complete fabrication based on Amy's analysis of optimal locations for human colonies. Over the next several standard cycles, we will be establishing permanent settlements in 47 systems, Jake continued. These colonies will serve as research centers, trading posts, and cultural exchange facilities. The truth was that Earth didn't even know the horizon's edge existed yet. Their experimental ship had been gone for 3 months without any communication home. For all Earth knew, Jake and his crew had been lost in humanity's first attempt at faster-than-light travel. But the galaxy didn't know that. To them, Jake was announcing the next phase of humanity's expansion into galactic civilization. After months of watching humans solve impossible problems and revolutionize established systems, nobody questioned whether the Human Federation could actually accomplish such ambitious plans. Our colonies will be open to all species interested in collaborative research and development, Jake added. We believe the future of galactic civilization lies in sharing knowledge and resources rather than maintaining traditional boundaries. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species representatives began making requests for human colonies in their territories. Trade guilds offered exclusive contracts. Research institutions proposed joint scientific ventures. Military alliances suggested mutual defense agreements. Jake had promised something that didn't exist, and somehow created demand that would make it real. Amy Rodriguez watched the proceedings from the diplomatic observation deck, still amazed by what they had accomplished. Her engineering consultations had sparked a renaissance of innovation across the empire. Alien engineers were abandoning rigid design principles in favor of adaptive systems that could evolve and improve over time. The Xerion artifact had become the centerpiece of this technological revolution. Instead of shutting it down, Amy had taught it to recognize modern engineering as an evolution of its ancient principles. Now it served as a bridge between old and new knowledge, helping alien civilizations integrate innovative approaches with traditional wisdom. The efficiency improvements are spreading faster than we anticipated, Amy reported to Jake during a break in the proceedings. 17 different species have implemented adaptive engineering protocols. System reliability is up 30% across all participating worlds. But the changes went deeper than mere efficiency. For the first time in centuries, alien species were actively experimenting with new ideas instead of simply maintaining existing systems. The Empire's long period of technological stagnation was ending. Chris Palmer had documented the psychological transformation happening throughout galactic society. His solution to the plague worlds had revealed something profound about how civilizations adapt to change. The techniques he had developed were now being used to help other species navigate rapid social and technological transitions. They're learning to embrace change instead of fearing it, Chris explained to Jake. For thousands of years, these civilizations have prioritized stability and tradition. Now they're discovering the benefits of flexibility and innovation. The biological diversity of the Empire was also proving to be an unexpected advantage. Each species brought different perspectives and capabilities to the collaborative projects that humans had initiated. Instead of competing for dominance, they were learning to combine their strengths. Lisa Chen had achieved something even more remarkable. Her diplomatic innovations had effectively ended warfare as the primary method of resolving conflicts between galactic civilizations. The Krell-Saren Agreement had become a template for transforming competitive tensions into collaborative competition. 12. Different border disputes have been resolved using cooperative competition models, Lisa reported. Instead of fighting over resources, species are competing to provide better services and solutions. Everyone wins and nobody loses face. The concept was so successful that the Dominion Syndicate was considering making it the official method for resolving territorial disputes. War wasn't being eliminated, but it was becoming the last resort rather than the first response to conflict. Sam Williams and Nicole Harper had revolutionized galactic commerce by treating interstellar trade like a complex systems optimization problem. Their new trade routes reduced shipping costs by 40% while increasing delivery speeds and reliability. More importantly, they had demonstrated how individual innovations could have system-wide effects. The improved trade routes made previously unprofitable colonies economically viable. New markets opened. Economic growth accelerated. The empire's prosperity reached levels not seen in millennia. As Jake concluded his presentation to the Dominion Syndicate, he realized they had achieved something unprecedented. They had accidentally transformed an entire galactic civilization, not through conquest or technology, but through the simple act of thinking differently. The Human Federation looks forward to continued collaboration with all member species of the galactic community, Jake concluded. We believe this is just the beginning of a new era of innovation and prosperity. The applause was thunderous, but Jake's mind was already focused on the next challenge, returning to Earth and explaining what they had committed humanity to accomplish. The journey home took 2 weeks, during which the crew prepared their report. For Earth Command, how do you explain that humanity had accidentally become a galactic superpower while trying to reach the nearest star? We're going to need a bigger space program, Amy observed as she compiled technical specifications for the colonies they had promised to build. And a diplomatic corps, Lisa added. And a Xenobiology Institute, a Galactic Trade Commission, and Interstellar Engineering Academy. Chris laughed. We promised them the Human Federation. Now we have to build it. Jake nodded. The fiction they had created was about to become reality, whether humanity was ready or not. The good news is that we have help. Half the galaxy is excited about working with us. When they finally arrived at Earth, their reception was unlike anything they had expected. Instead of a debriefing about their experimental flight, they were greeted by Admiral Peterson and the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff. Captain Morrison, Admiral Peterson said, we've been receiving communications from something called the Dominion Syndicate. They seem to think Earth is already a major galactic power. Jake looked at his crew, then back at the assembled military leadership. Admiral, I need to brief you on the current situation, and you're going to want to sit down for this. The briefing lasted 6 hours. Jake explained their accidental entry into galactic civilization, their improvised diplomacy, and the commitments they had made on humanity's behalf. He showed them star charts of promised colonies, trade agreements worth trillions of dollars, and research partnerships that could advance human technology by centuries. Let me understand this correctly, Admiral Peterson said when Jake finished. You accidentally discovered a galactic empire, convinced them that humanity is an advanced spacefaring civilization, and committed us to establishing 47 colonies across multiple star systems. That's essentially correct, sir. And if we don't follow through on these commitments, the galactic economy might collapse, several ongoing conflicts could restart, and humanity would be revealed as the greatest liars in galactic history. Admiral Peterson was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his staff. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we're building an interstellar civilization. How soon can we get started? Within days, Earth's entire space program was reorganized around the promises Jake had made. The experimental faster-than-light drive was put into mass production. Colonial planning teams began working around the clock. Diplomatic training programs were established for first contact scenarios. Most importantly, Earth began preparing for the moment when galactic civilization would meet the rest of humanity. The world Jake had promised existed would have to be built from scratch in record time. 6 months later, the first Human Federation colony ship departed Earth orbit, carrying settlers to a system 40 light-years away. The passengers included engineers trained in Amy's adaptive design principles, diplomats educated in Lisa's cooperative competition techniques, and scientists eager to study alien ecosystems with Chris's methods. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new colony ship, watching Earth recede into the distance. They had set out to reach the nearest star and accidentally committed humanity to conquering the galaxy through the power of creative problem-solving. "Any regrets?" Amy asked, joining him at the window. Jake thought about the question seriously. They had lied their way into galactic politics, made promises they weren't qualified to keep, and